How's it going, y'all? My name is OhDough, and in this video I'll be showing you how to kill Rezakiri with every single weapon, or almost every single weapon, in under 3 minutes. And the goal was to not use damage potions if I could help it. And for most weapons I didn't have to, but the last two I definitely had to use damage potions. There was no way I was getting anywhere close to under 3 minutes if I didn't. And that is the goal of this video, so let's get into it. So this whole video started off with me trying to kill Rezakiri in under 3 minutes using the axe and no damage potions, because damage potions make the fights much faster and just more easy in general, because they're actually pretty strong. Potions in general are pretty good to use, so if you're having a hard time killing things with Dauntless, use potions. But anyway, the goal was to try and find damage outside of having potions. So my first step was finding a good weapon, and I chose the Reaper of Night, which is the Shroud Axe. And the reason for this is because, first off, it's an Umbral weapon, so it's pretty strong against Rezakiri in general, because Rezakiri is a Radiant Behemoth, which is weak to Umbral. Anyway, the unique equip on this weapon is when you're under 20% health, you deal 50% extra damage, which is why I'm basically one hit this entire freaking fight. The whole time, perpetually one hit. And outside of that, I chose gear that gave me, you know, the meta cells. So +6 Cunning, Overpower, Rage Hunter, and I wanted attack speed, so I got Wild Frenzy and Conduit, just so I could actually get my swings off with the axe, because if you don't know, you need attack speed for the axe on a lot of fights, because without it, you're sitting there, you're charging your attacks, the behemoth attacks you, and you have to dodge your attack without ever swinging. So attack speed lets you actually swing, so it's a nice thing, if you don't know about it. And for anyone that's new, I actually don't use the Drask Lantern on this build because Embermane Lantern gives me more attack speed. The instant cast gives me 30% attack speed for 8 seconds, so it's a godsend when playing the axe. This is sort of why the Embermane Lantern is really strong for the axe. That instant ability to get attack speed like that is really nice for the axe, especially in fights like this. The nice thing about this build is that it's pretty modular with other Shroud weapons, such as the hammer and the sword. And for the hammer, the only thing I had to change was from the axe to the hammer, and then the lantern from Embermane's Rapture to Drask Fury, because I didn't need the instant cast for attack speed, and I would rather have the instant cast for damage instead. Now, aside from getting low health and being basically one shot again, playing hammer on Reza is a little strange. It's always felt different to me for some reason. And the difference now is that you have Aether Slam, which is busted, so it's pretty fun to use on Reza, because if you land an Aether Slam going all the way down its like spine, it's crazy. It's a pretty good feeling. But the way you play hammer on Reza is you want to keep a maximum uptime, or try to keep maximum uptime on your Mighty Landbreaker special, which gives you 25% extra damage, and if it's a buffed shell or an Aether Shell, it gives you 40% extra damage for 30 seconds. And one tip I can give is, if you're playing solo with a hammer and a part looks weak, or if it's bubbly in the face, if you prime your next hit, it'll pretty much stagger it, because if you have Aether Charged shells, then you're doing a ton of damage, especially if you have freaking Mighty Landbreaker active. Like, you're doing a ton of damage, alright? The next weapon I tried on Rezakiri was the sword, which before I had killed a ton, but every single time I was using damage potions such as Pylons, Frenzy Tonics, and Assault Tonics. So the build I'm using is very similar to the other previous two builds. The difference is, instead of having Conduit at all, I swapped it out for Energized at +3, and I have Aether Attunement at +6. So the reason for that is I already have attack speed from Wild Frenzy, so I don't need to have more, because for the sword, I don't like having too much attack speed. It makes my attacks feel pretty wonky, and I don't appreciate it, you know? So instead of having attack speed, I opted for more Energized to charge my meter quicker to get an overdrive faster. And aside from that, my mods are the Valiant Overdrive and Reactive Hilt. And to be clear, if you guys do not know, Reactive Hilt is freaking bonkers. It's crazy good. You can get an at-will crit, which I don't suggest rolling all the time, so don't roll every 5 seconds to do a crit. But what you can do is roll into a crit if you're dodging an attack, and also you can use your Q to proc Reactive Hilt as well. If you roll into a crit and then you do your combo and then you Q into a crit and do a combo, then it's fun. It is just fun, and I suggest doing it, and I suggest trying it, because it's a pretty good time. And I think the reason why I like it so much and why I think it's so good is because if you roll left click, that's pretty fast to do, so that I can't deny. But if you try and roll right click, that's pretty slow. Now if you Q right click, that's pretty fast, and that gives you a hefty crit. Now we're to the weapon where I can't use shroud weapons because repeaters do not have a prism that give you a shroud unique equip, which is kind of sad. I wish they would, but they don't. Instead, I had to go with a true flawless build using Predator, Overpower, Evasive Fury, and on top of that I had Conduit and a little bit of Swift and some Aether Attunement as well. For the repeater customization, the main thing I want to focus on is the Lucky Magazine. For this magazine, you get up to 24% crit chance if you're at 0 bullets, and the reason that's good is because if you're using the Salvo Chamber and you cast your right click and you're at 0 bullets, you have a 24% chance to make that attack critically strike. And if it does, those are some big boy damage numbers. So I emphasize on doing that. And aside from that, just focus parts that aren't broken to try and trigger Overpower, which if you break apart, you get Overpower states. It's very helpful. And then the fight should be cake if you can do that. Alright, we're to the weapon where I actually had to use damage potions and pylons to kill Rezakiri quick enough. And for my consumables, I had the damage pylons, the frenzy tonics, and aether drop tonics to help me with just extra damage in general. And for the chainblade customization, I had the cruel rift strike because I prefer this way more than the other special. And for the mod, I have serrated blades since Akeda tells me that's the best mod for chain blades, and I believe it, and I also believe him because he's a chain blade god. So listen to the mans when he says something's good for the chain blades. And I will say that using chain blades on Rezakiri, even with consumables, it took me a lot of attempts to kill it quick enough. But what helped me was focusing the arms and the head whenever it was on the ground, and trying to focus on using my swinging blades, which was a proc off of serrated blades, as much as possible. And also, pylon placement is very crucial on this fight. It's not very easy to do per se, but the main thing is if you get a break or a stagger, put down a pylon, and also if it does like a bubble attack and then goes down to the ground, put a pylon down then as well, because that means that it will basically do the attack and then drop down the ground and be there for a while, so you have a lot of uptime on the pylons. Okay, so we're finally to the weapon that I did not have a great time playing because it is so hard to get a good time with. It was impossible for me. I think that maybe January and on can do it, but I can't. I tried insanely hard to do this right. I tried so many different builds. I did as much as I could. I tried so many different things. I tried different specials. Just, bruh. This fight was so hard with the Warpike. It was crazy. It was just so much to do with the Warpike to try and make it work. Because the sad part is, if you could wound the tail, this fight would be cake. It would be so easy with the Warpike, but you can't. You can't wound the tail. You can't wound the tail gem. Like, bruh. The Warpike on this fight is rough. I'm not sure you can get a sub 3. At least I know I can't. I know that I can't right now. I tried very hard to do it, and I can't. But anyway, the build for this fight, it's pretty unique. I'm still using the Shroud weapon in this build, but instead of using Wild Frenzy plus 6, I opted to go for Savagery plus 6 because the Warpike can wound as a weapon in general. It's the only weapon that can wound without using cells, but to increase that wounding potential and to get faster wounds, I opted to go for plus 3 Acidic to just have a faster wound uptime. And to further increase that wound uptime, I went with Insight Tonics, which give you 40% increased wound damage. And on top of that, I had Frenzy Tonics and Pylons as well. Earlier, I kept talking about swapping specials, and the truth is, I think when it comes down to the specials for the Warpike, Savage Wellspring is very good in groups, but Concussive Payload is very good in solo play. Especially on Rezakiri, because Rezakiri will go into the sky, it'll do moves where it runs away, and you can use your missile to do damage, which I was hitting for 7k, like 7,000 real health damage numbers, because I have Acidic on, right? So my damage is cut in half. So the numbers you see, just multiply by 2, and that's my actual damage. But sadly, even with that 7k damage hits that I was getting, which were kind of luck-based, but anyway, it wasn't enough to kill Rezakiri quick enough. I think my fastest hunt was a 344, and that was using a different build, but still, I think this is a very hard weapon to get a fast kill time with. And I feel like I was playing pretty well, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway guys, if this video was helpful, leave a like, it helps me out, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.